This video and set of slides is our introduction to our next standard, which is MS-ESS 3-3. MS is for middle school, and ESS means it's an environmental science standard. So we are still talking about our environment with Earth and human activity. Our standard says we will apply scientific principles to design a method for monitoring and minimizing a human impact on the environment. Unfortunately, with distance learning, we won't get to truly design one of these methods since we're not in the classroom together, but we are going to look at some methods and really critically look at those to see if they are effective methods for monitoring and minimizing human impact on our environment. Have a piece of paper out with you. We're going to take notes with this video and set of slides. So pause the video if you need to get paper and a pencil. By the end of this week, you should hopefully be able to examine human environmental impacts on land and then assess the kinds of solutions that are feasible, which really means that they are possible. And we're going to evaluate those solutions that could reduce our human impact. This week is all about our land resources. The coming weeks, we will look at other types of resources found in other parts of our world, but this week it's all about the resources found on land. Our essential question, as we critically look at these solutions, is how well does a solution meet the criteria to monitor and minimize human impact on Earth's land? So this video and set of slides is all about reminding you about our natural resources. This set of slides should be mostly review, but in case if you forgot anything since it was way back in the fall, this is our review day to get you prepared for the rest of this standard. So it's broken down into 3 parts. So starting with this, we're just looking at natural resources. Then we're going to look at waste management and food management, which is really just how we farm and use agriculture. So what is the problem here with our human activities versus our land and our Earth? Human activities have significantly altered the land. Now, when we do this, these changes sometimes damage or destroy our natural habitats and ultimately can cause the extinction of other species. Now, this very simple diagram that's really just from Google shows, hopefully just in simple images, how all these things are connected. Our environment, of course, provides our food supply. Our food supply leads to our mortality, fertility, population growth, and our age structure. And all of those things, such as age or population size, lead to labor and food demand. So these are all interconnected, and it's kind of like a web, and that's why these problems are actually much more complex when we are trying to develop solutions. Our human population right now is already over 7 billion people around the entire world. Scientists predict that the Earth can only hold about 10 billion people sustainably, and that means that our Earth's carrying capacity is 10 billion. We talked about carrying capacity last week, so hopefully this is a good example for you to remember what carrying capacity means. So looking at the difference there, we only have room for about 3 billion more people on this planet. So in the near future, Earth can't provide for all of us. 3 billion might seem like a lot, but over a few generations, it can happen pretty quickly. So I want you to stop this video and open up the link to read the article to try to find the 3 major solutions that have been proposed to support this issue. This is the article looking at how many people our world can support, and it discusses our carrying capacity and our ecological footprint. There are some solutions that are involved in this article, so try to find them before moving on with this video. Did you find these 3 solutions? First is we need to improve our technology. So if our technology becomes better, hopefully we'll be able to mitigate the problems that we have ultimately caused. Number 2, we need to slow our population growth. Again, 3 billion people can happen pretty quickly when it's across the whole planet and through multiple generations. And number 3, we need to change our global culture. So making decisions that take the environment into account and really value our environment. So these are three very critical solutions that scientists have developed as we try to look at this carrying capacity and overpopulation crisis on our planet. Now we want to take a step back and really assess why that carrying capacity is what it is. And it all has to do with the resources. Last week we talked about resources as well. Remember, there are limiting factors to each population, and those resources are the limiting factors. Ever since the Earth was inhabited, humans and all life forms have depended on things that exist freely in nature, and we need all of those things to survive. If you try to think about all the things you need on a daily basis, they all come from nature, and we call those resources. These things include water, land, soil, rocks, forests and vegetation, animals, fossil fuels, and minerals. We call these natural resources because they are from nature, but they are necessary for our life. Each of those natural resources that I mentioned is on this screen, and you can see what we generally use those resources for. Some of them might seem a little more obvious, like water we use for drinking, but did you know that we also use water for our energy sources? You'll learn about water next week. Oil we use for energy. When you drive somewhere, the oil that is in your car is what allows you to move. Forests provide many things, including wood, food and medicine, pulp, recreation, home for wildlife. Rubber and cotton can be manufactured from forests. So you can see that each of these has multiple purposes and multiple things that humans have been able to use the resources for. So if we lose one or if we affect one, then the humans will definitely feel that impact. So our natural resources exist in nature. That makes sense. So we tap into their supply to survive and to just function. Natural resources are all connected. Therefore, if one is taken away, it'll affect the supply or the quality of the others. So one major example is if water was eliminated from an area, then the vegetation or the plants, the soil, the animals, and even the air in that area will be affected in some way, and probably in a negative way. If you'd like to pause the video on this screen and this slide, you'll see these two diagrams that really just show very generally the connection between all those different resources and those parts of our world. So you can see the water compared to the land, the soil, and deep below we have our oil, coal, and natural gas. And when humans pull those out from deep below our Earth's surface and we burn them in our factories, in our cars, in our homes, our fossil fuel emissions enter our atmosphere, and it really is a cycle. If one thing gets eliminated, then that will affect the rest of the cycle as well. Here's another simple diagram to show how carbon specifically is moving through our ecosystems. There's carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, and the only type of organism that can pull that carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere are plants that use photosynthesis. No other organism can take carbon dioxide in and turn it into something else. So if all of our plants disappeared, our deforestation removing plants, then that will affect our atmosphere. Same with our carbon being released when we burn our fossil fuels. If we use up all the oil and all the coal and all of those deposits of carbon that are deep below in our Earth's in the Earth's crust, below the surface, then we won't be able to power our cars anymore. So what will we be able to do? So hopefully this and the other images will help you to understand the connection. If you'd like to draw one of these in your notes, I think that's a great idea, but it's not necessary. So natural resources can be what we call non-renewable or renewable. And this should be review. Hopefully you remember this from around Thanksgiving time. We talked about this. Non-renewable is exactly what it sounds like. It means that those resources cannot be replaced once they've been destroyed. So some examples include those fossil fuels. So as we use all the fossil fuels, it takes millions of years for those to become a high enough volume for us to actually use. And so I'll explain how fossil fuels come to be in the next couple slides. Our renewable resources are those that are constantly available or that they can be reasonably replaced and recovered. So renewable resources include solar, air and wind, water, though that one is complicated that you'll learn about next week, and then soil and plants. So let's talk about fossil fuels. These are definitely a non-renewable resource. It actually takes millions of years for fossil fuel reservoirs to form deep underneath the Earth's surface. Fossil fuels are formed when heat and pressure meets the decomposed organisms from the surface. So as plants and animals die and get buried beneath the dirt, they decay and decompose, and over time they get pushed further and further down as time passes and as more organisms come to be and ultimately die on top of them. Now, as they get pushed further and further down, they get closer to the Earth's core, and it gets hotter and more pressure as they get pushed down. And then that reaction that's happening allows coal, natural gas, and oil to form deep below the Earth's surface. It's still in the Earth's crust, but it's very deep in below the surface. So this takes millions of years. If we use up all of our natural gas in our lifetime, in the next 20 or 30 years even, then what will we do to power those things that we have relied on those fossil fuels and those resources for? We'll have to wait for millions of years, hundreds of millions of years, to get that coal and that natural gas and that oil back. So we call that non-renewable. Animals are also considered a non-renewable resource. You've probably heard of all sorts of animals that are either endangered or have gone extinct. Now that means that that animal, that species, is now non-renewable, because if people hunt them and don't ensure that they're able to reproduce and continue the next generation, then ultimately that animal or plant or any species will become endangered and ultimately extinct. Once they're extinct, they cannot come back. They are non-renewable. However, animals can also be renewable. You probably eat meat, a lot of you do. And those animals, like chickens and cattle, are hopefully renewable because with a bit of care, they can produce offspring and replace the adult animals that we use for our food. Even though some renewable resources can be replaced, they may take many years, and that doesn't always make them renewable. So there is a gray area here. There's not always just a yes or no answer, and animals are one great example of that. So the more we use these resources, the better our planet will be. As we use the renewable resources, we know that they can just keep coming back. So solar energy, think about how much the sun is just beating down on you in the summertime. If we could harness that energy and use that to power our houses, our cars, our manufacturing plants, then it won't run out. Water is also considered renewable, and we'll talk about that more next week. And then wind, again, is considered a renewable resource because there's really no limit to how much wind there can be. It's not always that simple that these are just the perfect answer, though, and you will learn more about the specific resources over the next couple weeks. So here are some big takeaways from today's slides and video. So please pause your video, take a look at this slide. If you don't have this information in your notes, then make sure you add it somewhere on your piece of paper. Humans are impacting our land, and the greater the population gets, the greater that impact becomes. Our world carrying capacity is 10 billion people, and we're already at over 7 billion people in 2020. So we have 3 billion left. There are 3 solution themes, including improving technology, slowing population growth, and changing global culture. Humans have always depended on these natural resources to live, and they are all connected. A non-renewable natural resource can't be replaced, and it takes a long time to replace it. But renewable is usually available, and it can come back when it's been used.